There was another response to the BBC that I gave on the immigration crisis a few days ago. Somebody expressed the doubt whether monastics should be talking about politics. Okay? And for me, when we're talking about, children being separated from their parents, that's not a political issue. It's a moral and humanitarian issue. Yeah. So I think that people of various faiths have a role to play in pointing out ethical issues to the rest of society. I think it's the politicians that turn these into political things. But from our side, they aren't political. We're just caring for these human beings. And like I said that day, just trying to imagine myself when I was a small kid, being separated from my parents like that is just, whoa. Yeah, no child should have to experience that. Okay, then there was another interesting one. This is from Scott. Okay, so he said, there has been a lot of anxiety in the country since Trump has taken office. I think it has been misplaced. The anxiety seems to jump from crisis to crisis, and the blame shuffled from one group to the next. Jeff Sessions this, Michael Cohen that. When I was at the Abbey last month, I heard someone say how troubled they were on the day after the election that Hillary Clinton wasn't elected. I hear people say, not my president. Okay. This new crisis is not really new. Okay, it became apparent on November 8th, 2016. Didn't we all know the gravity of the problems in the U.S. on that day? I don't feel surprised at what is going on, and I don't feel as if this new crisis is any more compelling to action than anything else I've seen over the past 2 years. I don't think that he's diminishing the importance of this crisis. I think he's saying we've had one crisis after the other, and they're all important. This president really is our president. He governs the country we live in, and we elected him, even though we may not have voted for him personally. It is our karma that resulted from the lives we have lived, either now or in the past. It appears to me that railing against the right wing, the Republicans, the white nationalists, is misplaced. Isn't it true that we have created this situation, and to blame others is dangerously short-sighted? We didn't create this situation by voting for him. We created this situation because we didn't do enough to stop it in the first place. By resisting only the Trump administration, I don't know what we accomplish. Our application of kindness is to create goodness, not to defeat one person or even all those who follow him. This problem in our country is much bigger than simply the Trump administration. Trump and his followers are not enemies, they are us. With much love, Scott. Okay, so I think he has a very good point here. You know, we clearly created the karma to be living in this country when this person was elected, living in this country with the resurgence of bigotry and white nationalism and so on and so forth. Okay, so it is part of our karma that, you know, we are born here at this time, living in this situation, in this country. Yeah, and I personally feel that it's not a thing of talking bad about the Republicans or the right nationalists or there's this or the that as the people, but what we need to do is talk about the views, yeah, and look at those views and ask, are they serving to better the country? Are they serving to better humanity? What are the values that hold our nation together? And I kind of feel like we had one set of values and one kind of ethical concern, more or less, that was generally being held, and that now people have been ignoring that. Okay. Of course, when we look back historically, white nationalism, for example, has been present since the Pilgrims arrived here. Yeah, because right from the very get-go, it was, we're more civilized, we're more advanced than these other people. So that isn't something new. Yeah, that doesn't mean it's something good. It isn't, and the values that, in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, the values that are set out there are wonderful values. What we're finding now, or at least what I'm discovering, is a lot of the history I learned was really quite lopsided. And hearing that some of the founding fathers had slaves and so on and so forth was really rather shocking for me. They never taught me that in school. So it's good that that kind of stuff is coming out, and that we know that, for example, racial discrimination against, again, white nationalism, all the whole thing, it's been in the country all along. And the thing is, now it's rearing its head more ferociously. It had kind of gone underground for a while, and now it's coming back. So it's an idea that we need to discuss as a country and really say, okay, well, look, here were the values that the founding fathers set forth, even if they themselves didn't live by all of them. Yeah, but the rest of us think they're wonderful values, and this has been what has held the country together until now, and we need to all come back as a country to these values. Okay, so to emphasize the values, the views, the things that hold us together, not just pointing fingers. Of course, it's when everything gets politicized, then everybody's pointing fingers, and what you have is arrows going every which way, and it really gets quite confusing. Personally, when I read the news and I hear this one blaming that one and that one blaming the other one, to me, as I've always talked in Dharma situations, to me, blame doesn't help at all. Whose fault is it? Who to blame? That doesn't matter. It's what are we going to do about it? And so I think that when things get politicized, we get very hung up in blaming and attributing fault. Yeah, but that really diverts us from the main issue, which is how to improve the situation. Yeah. So I think we need to switch our national dialogue to how do we improve the situation instead of who's pointing the longest fingers at who. Okay. Yeah, and when he says that it's not a question of one administration, he's very correct, It's the views that we hold. And the way, what I feel has been very destructive is that everything's gotten so politicized that it becomes difficult to talk with people with different views. It reminds me very much of the Vietnam era, yeah, where, my generation was in college and people would go home for family holidays and there would be a big fight about the Vietnam War. Yeah, my parents, thank goodness, were against the war, but my friends, it was like horrible within families and communities, this argument about the war. And so, again, to come back to what are our values and how do we carry those out and act those out as a country. Yeah. Yes.
I think one thing that gets lost in the rhetoric, I think, is that none of the things that are happening today in this country are happening in isolation. You know, it's sort of a long string of cause and effect, as we know. And that some of the bigger stressors, for example, the issues about immigration, they have been influenced really by this country's own economic and political policies that implemented in relationship to South America and Central America. So that it has been previously in this country's best interest to exercise policies that actually negatively impact the economy of those countries. Not only that, but that also meddle and impact the political situation, favoring one candidate over another without really having a deep understanding of the culture or the workings of those societies. Just same thing that's happened in the Middle East with Iraq and the other countries. And so when you have that effect of destabilizing a whole region politically or economically, then you have then this situation where there's a lot of people that are poor, displaced, living in violent conditions, and governments that have been not receptive. And so that influences back what happens in this country. So I think that it may be useful to also examine what are those policies, both financial and political, that are at the bottom of what we're seeing in terms of immigration. When people need a place to go, and if they cannot stay in their country, they have to find another place. So,
that's why this country is a country of immigrants, because people couldn't stay where they came from, by and large, and came here. So, what you said is very, very true. And to look not only at those policies, but what are the values we hold behind those policies? Because when we care just about our own country and not about what happens in other countries, then we get this kind of problem.
This is why His Holiness says that if we're going to be selfish, let's be wisely selfish and let's help everybody be happy. If everybody's happy where they are, they won't have a need to go elsewhere.
What I feel a lot of grief around actually is that, what's happening so visibly here in the US now actually probably is a policy exercise worldwide by a lot of developed countries. Years ago, I went to a global forum on migration and development, and it was quite startling to hear some of the African representatives speak up about how if most developed countries have an immigration policy that values skilled workers and excludes unskilled people. And they were just pointing out that as a result, you can't find a decent doctor in Ethiopia. Most have migrated. And it has long-term, very damaging effects on the economies of developing countries. It's almost, you feel almost hopeless watching that happen. So if anything, at least people are speaking up for values in the US and protesting such policies. Across Europe, you see people have turned away boats, right? Just that. Or, I come from a country where the wall is very clear and there are signs on it that show we'll shoot on sight if you trespass. That's Singapore. So, it's hard for me not to fall into despair when I think about how the whole world seems to be functioning like that, where the opportunities for the desperately poor have to migrate are getting circumscribed and become more and more difficult.
And as climate change becomes stronger, we're going to have more migration, and the situation will become more difficult. But this is the nature of samsara. So there's no sense feeling despair, because, if you take Scott's position, why are we born in samsara? Because we didn't do enough to get ourselves out before. Yeah, and why are other people born? Again, because we've been lying on the beach for a while, and if we're able to be of greater benefit to others, they can be born in different places. They can practice the path. Yeah. So despair do not say that word. It does not have a role in this conversation. Yeah.